Hello, everybody. I am here to make a optimized guide on Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin Edition. The point of this guide is to make people's lives a little bit easier and to make what is a very hard game without knowledge into a little bit of a more enjoyable experience. So I have a clean install of the game here. I actually downloaded it about a week ago. I had the lighting engine mod installed, and I could not figure out how to delete it, so I just did a reinstall of the game. So it is all the completely unaltered copy, besides one modification. If you look in the upper left-hand corner of the game, you will see a bunch of text. You'll see a timer, a little eye symbol, and then you'll see Blue Acolyte 2.05. That is the Blue Acolyte mod, my bad. And it really is just there to help protect me from online malicious cheaters. Because in the last couple of weeks, there have been issues with people going around invading worlds and having a script run that essentially injects invalid items into your inventory. Now, Blue Acolyte will prevent this from happening, and it won't even connect you with those players. There's a global blacklist, and a lot of those players are on it. So if you at all plan to go online during this run of the game, during this playthrough, whether it is for co-op purposes, whether you plan to invade, which it does have a couple of cool features for invasions. So if you want to invade, just another reason to download it. But even if you're just doing it for co-op, I would highly recommend it just because it keeps you safe. Another note on Blue Acolyte is during the run, if we get invaded, you will hear a sound of Navi saying, "Hey, listen," in your ear. You can customize the Blue Acolyte notification sound because it notifies you with a sound whenever you get invaded or whenever you have a connection to somebody else. And I customize mine to be Navi saying, "Hey, listen," because I think it's cute. So we're going to start a new game. We're going to delete this character because I don't need that character anymore. I think I was just doing a Hexer run, so this is more important. And we're going to get into it. Now, the very first thing is I am playing on a gamepad. I'm playing on an Xbox controller. And if you are playing on an Xbox controller or a PC or a PS4 controller, PS5 controller, whatever it might be, if you're using a gamepad, you'll be fine. You really don't have to pay attention to this next step. However, if you are playing with mouse and keyboard, there are a couple things you want to be aware of. First and foremost is that mouse and keyboard, it doesn't have any prompts in the game itself. So whenever you're playing, you will see Xbox 360 prompts come up if you are on the PC version, which I should also mention I am playing this on PC. Obviously, with Blue Acolyte having a mod installed, it's obviously on PC. But console players, you won't have to worry about this prompt thing either. But if you are a keyboard and mouse player, one, be aware that all your prompts, you're really going to have to know which button in the prompts is meaning the button on the keyboard. I don't play keyboard and mouse, so I really don't have very many tips to do that. You just kind of got to get used to it. One thing I do know about mouse and keyboard, though, is that you need to disable a certain setting. So when you open the game up, go over to key bindings, like I am right here, and go this first menu with the mouse on it, go into that, and you'll see this disable double clicking option. What you're going to want to do is, if it says off, turn that to on. Now, whenever you open the game from now on, let's say I just opened the game right now. Let's say I just opened it. What you're going to want to do is every time you open the game, you want to come over to key bindings, and you're just going to want to cycle that to on. That's all you're going to want to do. You're going to want to make sure that you turn it off and turn it back on. Just like troubleshooting all of our electronics. You want to turn it off, turn it on again, quite literally. The reason we do that is because with the double click feature enabled, your mouse is going to have an input delay of roughly half a second. I don't know why. It's just a quirk of the PC port. And it's kind of unfortunate, but luckily they allowed us to disable it. So once you do that, you're going to want to go across the bridge, come over, grab this item underneath the waterfall. just because it's nice to have. We're going to go buy the nest later. We'll drop it off. I will say that this guide is not going to be a catch-all, make sure that you pick up every single item, and it's not going to be the world's most optimal guide either. But it will be optimized, it will make your experience easier, and ultimately, I think it's going to be a little entertaining because I'm not a god at this game, I'm not the best at this game, but I do know what I'm doing, and it means that, well, there are going to be plenty of times where I seemingly get through an area without much trouble. There's also going to be times where I probably die, and probably in not so, intelligent ways. So don't worry about me being a perfect gamer. I'm just a random ass dude who decided to make a guide on the game. I just happen to have some knowledge on it. So we are going to start with Sorcerer. The reason we're doing that is just for the efficiency. It's the most efficient class for the build I'm planning for us to use. It gets access to Soul Arrow early, which is a great spell. It does great damage, it has range on it, and it's got plenty of casts, so it can really hard carry during the early game. And we're going to pick Healing Wares as our gift. Now, again, you can set up your character however you want beyond this. This guide, as I said, is just sort of a trying to make everybody's lives a little bit easier sort of thing. The reason that I made this is actually because I am in a few Dark Souls Discord servers, and there's a lot of people that come around and they're just very confused because Dark Souls 2 is very different. It's a very different game compared to like Dark Souls 3 or Dark Souls 1. It plays very differently, and there's a lot of people who get turned off by that. And we do have text guides available, which I will pin, or I should say, Dark Souls, the Discord and me coming out. I will link down in the description if you want to read those, because those are going to be available at all times. And if you ever want to reference them, they'll be there. If you ever want to try to figure something out for yourself. This guide is going to come out over time, so you're not always going to have the exact answer to a question. So if you're really questioning some things, I would say take a look at that. The guide that I'll pin. I'm going to say that so many times. The guide that I will link. But if you do want a full it's more of a walkthrough rather than a guide, I will admit, because, like I said, I'm not going to be scripted, telling you the most optimal way to do everything. It's more of a casual playthrough that I'm just so happening to record. Now, one thing that you may have noticed, depending on what you named your character, is that looking up at your health and stamina bar, you may notice some symbols up there, like this one, or this one, or this one. Now, or you also may notice that your character automatically sprints, or that your character, if you're two-handing your weapon, or your staff, I should say, automatically guards. These are hotkeys that enable things such as auto sprint or auto guard. Now, you don't want these on unless you have a very niche situation in which you want to be guarding or sprinting consistently. In fact, for sprinting specifically, there's almost no reason to be using that. Unless you're doing like a speed run, I think is what people use it for. This is not going to be a speed run, I promise. So on the default keyboard layout, auto sprint, that symbol is bound to your X button. So if you have auto sprint on, just press M again and it'll turn it off, or I should say X again. And if you have auto guard on, just press M and it'll turn itself off. The reason that it does that is because when you're naming your character is still technically in the world and is like your character is still there. It doesn't deload your character. So when you hit those buttons, it activates those hotkeys. So when you're naming your character, if they have an M or M in the name or an X in the name, you can accidentally turn those hotkeys on. I saw a guy who came into one of the Dark Souls Discord servers and was just raising absolute hell because about Dark Souls 2 just being a piece of shit because he couldn't figure out why his character was always in the guard animation and he felt like he had no stamina regen because he had auto guard on. He got all the way, probably almost a quarter of the way through the game before he realized he had auto guard on, and before we realized or helped him realize he had auto guard on. And it was just really goofy. So make sure that you have those turned off. Now, this build is going to be a sort of catch-all, is the best, or a do-all character is the best way I can describe it. The character is going to have access to multiple different damage types and multiple different elemental damage types to complement them. So we're looking at our end game to have both the homunculus mace, which is the best mace in the game for general purpose. Craftsman hammer might be comparable, but homunculus mace generally is going to do the most damage, and it's going to just be a little more accessible because it has less stat requirements while still doing great damage. We're going to have Ice Rapier, which is a little later in the game. Both Homunculus Mace and Ice Rapier are mid to late game items, but we will have their counterparts in the Mace and the Rapier much earlier. But we're going to have the Ice Rapier, which is in contention for the best damage per second in the game. I should also mention that the Homunculus Mace is strike damage, which is very good and often the least resisted damage type to most bosses and enemies. The Ice Rapier is thrust damage, which is also a very good damage type. And the DPS on the Ice Rapier is, if it's not the highest in the game, it is one of the highest in the game. I'm willing to put money on it because I have used it, and with proper ring setups, you can hit almost 1,000 damage per hit if you time things properly. And you can just melt bosses. And it also, the damage on hit is high enough where it'll one-shot most enemies too. Or 1 to 2 shot, I should say. We got a Titanite slab out of the nest. So when you come over to this nest, just a side note, come over to the nest, drop that small, smooth, and silky stone that we got. Make sure you use the leave function, not the discard function. If you use the discard function, it'll destroy the item. If you use the leave function, it'll put it in the nest and you'll get something cool out of it. That's just a randomized table that it pulls from. You won't always get a Titanite slab. Sometimes you'll get consumable souls or some infusion stones, whatever it might be. Anyways, back on topic. So Ice Rapier, thrust damage, very high DPS. Homunculus Mace is a good strike damage option. And we will also have access to the old Knight Hammer. Now, the old Knight Hammer is a bit of a funky beast. It's actually a great hammer, which you might say, well, we already have a hammer. Why are we using a great hammer? Because the old Knight Hammer has very high damage for very low stat and cost. All you need is 6 dexterity and 15 strength to two-hand it. And it does very good damage. It has an insane R2, which is lovingly known as the Pancake, because it just essentially stun locks enemies infinitely. It hard counters the... how do I put this? The community's most hated area in general, which is the Frigid Outskirts, which is actually on a lot of people's lists as the worst area in all the Souls series. And it trivializes most enemies. I prefer to use other options, but the old Knight Hammer is something you can always fall back on and will always perform very well. And on top of that, we're going to be using a lot of rings and weapon buffs. Now, Dark Souls 2 is funky because physical damage scaling, so like leveling up your strength and dexterity, oftentimes are not going to do anything notable over infusions until an incredibly high level. I'm talking like 50, 60, 70 dexterity or strength, respectively. And that's just to match or slightly exceed the damage output of infusions like a lightning infusion. So a lot of our damage is going to be coming from ring buffs and weapon buffs. There are 2 rings in the game specifically we're going to be looking at. They are the Ring of Blades and Flynn's Ring. Flynn's Ring scales conversely with your max equip load. I'm sure that I got that definition slightly wrong, but essentially it means that the lower your vitality stat, which is that third stat in the column right there that you can see on the far left, you can see the vigor and vit. Vit is vitality. As long as that number for our purposes stays below 10, we will be getting max damage from Flynn's Ring. And also, Ring of Blades just adds flat physical damage, or flat physical AR. I do not remember which one it is, but essentially all we need to know is it makes our damage numbers go up. So you're always going to want to be wearing a Ring of Blades variant when we have it. And then we're going to use a lot of weapon buffs, specifically Sunlight Blade and Dark Weapon. Now, I know some people have an aversion to weapon buffs. They just don't like them. Unfortunately, with the way that Dark Souls 2 works, weapon buffs are really, 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 really good to an even higher degree than in Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 3. Because, like I said, physical scaling just doesn't do that much. Unless you're using a couple of very specific weapons, and those weapons generally aren't that great to begin with. So the weapon buffs are going to be helping us out immensely, and plus, weapon buffs are just goated in the Dark Souls games. So one extra thing, you're going to want to talk to this sad dude here. His name is Salden. He's going to complain to you for a little while. He actually is a great opportunity to talk about NPCs in this game. Often in Dark Souls 2, NPCs are going to insult you. There are some people who don't like that and kill NPCs. Don't kill NPCs in this game. This run will be NPC deathless, I believe. I don't have any plans to kill any, at least. And you probably shouldn't kill NPCs unless you know what you're losing from them. So for Salden, he's just kind of a dick, but you do get a nice early game ring if you join his covenant. So when so all you're gonna want to do is go through his dialogue. Eventually, he'll give you this prompt, say join the Way of Blue covenant, say yes to that, and he'll give you the blue seal. We're gonna equip that right away because the blue seal gives us just a little bit of extra HP. It's like 10. It's not that much HP, but it's extra HP and it's free. So we're gonna use it. If you look at the bar right now, like the difference between not having it, so all the rest of the bonfire get us to full health, you'll just see it's probably, it's not the greatest HP buff in the world, but it's something. Like, that little extra tiny tim of a goddamn tick might do something, so may as well have it. It's free. But yes, the way we're going to play this is we're going to have multiple damage types with strike and thrust damage. We're going to have multiple elemental buffs with Dark Weapon, which is dark damage, and Sunlight Blade, not Lightning Blade. Sunlight Blade, which is lightning damage, both of which compete for the best damage type in the game. So we'll be alternating our uses between those two, depending on the boss and resistances, and a little bit later in the game, maybe even through areas. However, for most of the game, we are going to be using Dark Weapon as our only buff, because Sunlight Blade requires a lot of investment and a very specific setup to make worth, because you only get one cast of Sunlight Blade per rest at a bonfire until very high levels of attunement, and we're not going to go that high in attunement. So we are going to be using an item called the Crown of the Old Iron King, which essentially, it replenishes casts of spells every minute and a half or somewhere around there, so every minute and 30 seconds roughly. And the max duration of Sunlight Blade is 99 seconds. So if you do the math, 60 seconds in a minute and a half is 90 seconds, and if Sunlight Blade lasts 99 seconds, that means by the time our Sunlight Blade will run out, we will have another cast of Sunlight Blade replenished by the crown. But unfortunately, both that crown and the levels needed are going to take us pretty much up right until the end game and when we're getting into DLCs. So we're going to be using Dark Weapon for most of the run, just because it is way less stat intensive, adds the same damage formula that Sunlight Blade uses, and just a very good damage type. Not necessarily the best damage type, but a good damage type. So, I sort of mentioned it already, but when I'm running through areas talking, I probably won't be mentioning all the items I'm picking up. Just kind of follow along. It's good to have all the items I'm grabbing, just because it'll give us a little more wiggle room with souls a little later. I should mention that these are metal chests. These chests, feel free to smack them if you're worried about trying to see if it's a mimic or not. Although once we come across a mimic, I'll show you a really easy way of telling whether it's a mimic or not. But if it is a wooden chest, like the next chest we're about to see, for the love of God, do not smack it. Like, you don't want to hit wooden chests, because if you hit wooden chests enough in Dark Souls 2, you break the chest. And we don't want the chests to break, because then, if they break, the item in it gets turned into rubbish, which is literally useless. So yeah, just don't hit chests in this game unless they're metal chests, because metal chests sometimes can be mimics. Wooden chests can sometimes be mimics, but hitting chests is just generally not a good idea because Dark Souls 2 makes it really easy to tell whether it's a mimic or not. Speaking of wooden chests, that's what a wooden chest looks like. So don't smack these, because if you do, eventually they break. And if there was an item inside of it, it would have turned into rubbish. Do a little parkour jump, grab this item. Now there's going to be a dude who pops up over here. He's right here. Feel free to shank him. The dagger is a super good option for any character because literally every single character can use it right out of the box, one-handed or two-handed. I don't necessarily know for some classes, but for our purposes, we start with one, and you can grab one in Things Betwixt. So we could technically have 2 daggers right now, but there's no need. I will say that the dagger R2 is better than the dagger R1 because the dagger R2 lunges you forward just a little bit. So when the attack pushes the enemy back a little bit, you follow, and it has a little longer range. The R1s can push enemies out of the range, and plus the R1s, besides doing less damage, also will break the weapon faster because R1s are super fast. So really, the best bang for your buck is the R2s. And those are just some dagger strats for you in case you run out of casts or anything like that. I don't want to crutch the soul arrow that we have, although you very easily can. Like, it's just stupid good. What you're going to want to do, come up here. Backstabs are still very good. Just because it's not Dark Souls 1 doesn't mean we shouldn't be using our backstabs. Especially in this early area with a dagger, because our dagger does insane backstab damage even when unupgraded. You want to come over here and kind of hang out for a little bit, and there's going to be a dude that drops down. We do that just so he doesn't jump scare us a little bit later. There's been many times where I think I've cleared all the hollows out in this area, and then this guy comes and greets me because I forgot about him. So just, take care of him. Now this next room does show off one of people's biggest gripes with Dark Souls 2, and that is the amount of enemies that they seem to have jammed into a lot of these areas. But I am going to show you how to take care of some of these areas. It's called going slow and steady and using your tools to your advantage. In this area specifically, abuse backstabs. You can one-shot every hollow here. So, do that. Dagger's great for it. There are some areas that are a little janky when it comes to enemy placement. Specifically, Iron Keep is a little bit weird. And if you've played through Iron Keep before, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But it's not that bad. Taking it slow, I enjoy, because it gives you a little time to kind of reflect on what you're doing. And with the other games, you kind of got to run around and just, burn through the game if you really... Or I guess I should say I burned through Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, good lord. I burned through 1 and 3 really fast because the game just allows you to. But Dark Souls 2 is kind of like... It's like taking... pardon my kind of weird analogy, but to me, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 is often... Specifically Dark Souls 3, but Dark Souls 1 too, can be more like taking the direct route to your goal, or taking the direct route on a car trip to your destination. Like, yeah, you'll see some sights, you'll have some good experiences, but it's the fastest way to do it, so it's, the most optimal way to do it. Dark Souls 2 forces you to take it a little slower. The way I like to think about it is Dark Souls 2 forces you to take the scenic route. And, be a little more mindful. This is a good example of getting ganged up on a little bit. You just kind of got to keep it cool. But yeah, see, I was talking, not really paying attention to what I was doing, going a little fast, and I triggered 4 guys at once. It's a great example of just, taking it slow. You gotta take it slow, gotta be observant. Because if you're not, you can very easily end up in a spot where you've got 16 hollows on your butt with 6 HP left, and you're like, ah. So just don't be that guy. Oh yeah, I forgot about him. So when you go on this ladder, just touch the ladder, and then drop off, because this guy will come down and greet you. and then you will shank him, so he'll regret doing it. But yeah, just don't do what I did and forget about that. Come up here, grab this item, and now we get to abuse Soul Arrow a little bit. Be careful if you're going to drop down off that ledge that I just dropped off of, because you can very much easily miss the edge and fall straight down. And if you fall down, you will die. Dark Souls 2 loves its gravity. And I think the fall damage calculation is a little different in Dark Souls 2, so it's a little more severe. Luckily, there's only one mandatory falling area in the game, maybe two. So that won't be much of an issue. The rest of the falls are either on mistake or by our own choice. So now this might be a little tough. One, because of a phenomena called baby jump, which essentially just means your jump gets screwed up. It's just random, seemingly. And two, because it just takes a little bit of bravery. You gotta just run, jump. I got a baby jump there, I think. Maybe. I'm used to coming to right about here. So I got a little bit of a shorter jump. Still made it, though. Just gotta be confident. Grab that stuff. And we'll go back up. Now, also, I totally forgot to tell you, equip your Estus Flask. It doesn't auto-equip like it does in the other games. So just, equip your Estus Flask. Because when you want it, you won't have it, and you'll be like, help. Although you do have life gems, which are the better Estus Flask in Dark Souls 2. Because they're faster, you can use them while they're moving. Yeah, all that fun stuff. They're just goated. So go into that corner, run back. This guy will come out, try to stab you with a hatchet, but, it's actually an axe, but whatever. Again, Soul Arrow, great for drawing enemies out. And then you can stand right in front of them and spam R1. Or maybe not. Me getting overconfident. Oof. See, it was all according to plan, because now I can talk about healing. So when you're at 50% HP or under, I always recommend trying to find a time to heal. Now, during boss fights, it's a little bit different, because if you try to find a window, if you're constantly trying to find a window to heal, and this kind of goes for regular PvE as well, but don't try to force a window to heal. Just try to find a natural time where you can get a heal off, just because if you're really looking for that heal, a lot of the times you'll end up getting killed for it. But if you're at 50% or lower, try to find a time to heal, because there are enemies in this game, like this Bastard Sword Knight right here that we just encountered, who can do a 2 to 3 hit combo depending on whether you roll or not at the right time, and he will wreck your shit if you're under 50% HP. He will probably kill you. So when you're under 50%, do yourself a favor and heal. Again, life gems are going to be your friend when it comes to... didn't mean to do that. Life gems are your friend when it comes to faster healing in the heat of the moment. But Estus Flasks heal maybe not as much. They don't heal as much HP at lower levels, but they do heal it faster. Now, plunging attack. There we go. And then poke the wall in celebration. Totally required. But yeah, so that's the first area, Forest of Fallen Giants. A lot of people may get frustrated with that. And I will admit, I've learned how to no-hit the area. Now, am I doing the no-hit strategy? Absolutely not, because that would be unfair to you guys. And also, I've forgotten half of it. But, the game doesn't spam enemies at you in a way that makes it completely unfair or unplayable. You just gotta be a little slow about things, which some people hate, and I totally understand. Before I played Dark Souls 2 and really got into it, I was such a Dark Souls 1 fan, which is a little bit faster, not by much, compared to Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 3 is way faster than Dark Souls 2. But, yeah, I was used to faster games. I was used to games that didn't have as punishing mechanics as Dark Souls 2 has. But eventually, you kind of get the philosophy of take it a little slow. And you actually learn to really love the game. I know I have. It's honestly probably become my favorite Souls game to PvE in. I still enjoy Dark Souls 1 PvP because I'm a nerd and a sweat, but that's a different conversation. So once you get into the Cardinal Tower area, if you were watching, you want to buy the Lenigrast key from Malentia, and you're going to want to warp back to Majula. Come over here, open up the door, and then go back. We're actually going to talk to the Emerald Herald real quick, because she's going to have some dialogue that we really don't care about. Don't level up. We're going to want to upgrade our Estus Flask, because I forgot to when we first left Majula, so we're going to do it now. And then you're going to want to sit at the bonfire. The reason we do that is to reload the area, because once you reload the area, Lenigrast will have moved from his little sulking position. He'll be in his shop doing his thing. Now you're going to want to use all of these souls. And come over here. And we're going to buy ourselves a mace. Not 4 maces, 1 mace. And then we're going to not repair. We're going to reinforce our mace to +1. Now we have a mace. It will say that you don't have the attributes to use it properly. To that I say, well, we need to upgrade now, don't we? The mace takes 12 strength to one hand, but Dark Souls 2 doubles your strength when you two-hand, unlike the other games, which is only a 1.5 times increase. So all we need is 6 strength to two-hand our mace, which we can get. So get 6 strength so we can two-hand our mace. And we're chilling. Now, that is where I'm going to end this episode. I really just kind of wanted to get sort of the high-level explanations out of the way. I will say the reason we grabbed the mace is because it does strike damage. As I've kind of talked about earlier, strike damage is a very good damage type. And coincidentally, 3 earlier bosses actually do not resist strike very well. It's actually the best damage type to use against them. Those bosses being Pursuer, Dragon Rider, and Rune Sentinels. Specifically, there are plenty of other bosses that do not resist strike very well either that we will be using mace on. So mace will be our primary weapon for the early game. And then eventually we will be swapping over to Rapier. But we will be using Rapier and Mace, and eventually Homunculus Mace and Ice Rapier interchangeably, depending on boss damage, resistances, and stuff like that. Which you don't have to know, I'll tell you, so don't worry about that. But for now, I appreciate you all for stopping by, and I will see you next time.